let's get into it. A spoiler-free movie review. I want to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's, a movie I picked to be my Halloween movie of the weekend. I was so excited to sit down in the theater. Kelsey didn't go with me because she doesn't do horror movies. I got my middle seat, one row up. It was all cozy, ready just to have some fun, have some thrills, have some scares. And this movie let me down, ruined my Halloween weekend. And I won't say that I had high, even medium expectations going into this movie. After watching the trailer, I saw some things that were some red flags, showing a lot of the plot, showing a lot of what would be the most scariest parts of the entire movie. So I knew it probably wasn't going to be the best thing ever, but I can respect a video game adaptation, which this is what this is. It's based on a video game. I'm not that familiar with the game, aside from what I remember from people in high school talking about how scary this game was. I thought maybe some of that would translate into the movie. It's also coming to us from Blumhouse, who does really solid horror movies. Just earlier this year, they created a horror icon with Megan. And then you have Josh Hutcherson, who we all remember as Peter Malark from The Hunger Games, the guy who was supposed to be it for a minute, whose acting career has taken a bit of a tumble. He never went on to be that guy. I think that was due to a lot of movies he was cast in just weren't the right roles for him. And then you have Matthew Lillard in this movie. You have Elizabeth Leo, who plays a cop who helps out Josh Hutcherson's character in this movie. So why did I not like it? First of all, the movie is about Josh Hutcherson's character who is down on his luck. After an incident went down, he was working as mall security. He punched a guy who he thought was abducting another kid, and it turns out it was just the boy's father. So he not only punched him, he pummeled the guy, and after that has been bouncing around from job to job. He lost his parents, he lost his brother, and is now taking care of his sister. So in order to prevent his aunt from taking custody of his sister, he has to just have a stable job. Now, when telling his story in this movie, there were so many cliches that they used to portray a person who is down on their luck, hit rock bottom. And that was one of them. At the very beginning, trying to get a job, he's listing out all the things he's had wrong with him. What's your deal, guy? That type of thing. It just felt very generic and very forced. And I was like, okay, maybe I can get past that, and we'll get into the horror, we'll get into some fun. But even the way this movie opened up was so generic. And that first kill in a horror movie is supposed to hook you in. It's supposed to showcase what is going to make this villain, what is going to make all these monsters great. And it was so lame. It set nothing up tone-wise. It was just kind of there. And that is kind of how this entire movie felt. It was a bunch of random scenes cut and pasted together. So how his character goes on, he's trying to find that job. He gets offered this one job by Matthew Lillard's character, and it's a security job working at this pizzeria that has been abandoned since the 80s. And they tell you this very loose story of what happened there, but it's all about him going there and figuring it out on his own. So I won't get into all those details, but essentially, yes, he's working this graveyard shift at this pizzeria, and you have these animatronic figures that are very creepy looking, which, aside from the girl in this movie who plays Abby, his young sister, those were my other favorite part of it. Just the way that they looked. Not the way that they acted, not the way that they interacted, or not even the way that they killed people. Just the way that they looked, because I thought that was going to be pretty novel. So then he takes the job, goes and starts working at this graveyard shift, and then that's where all the creepy things happen. Where this movie lost me, really, is that you have a character here working in a creepy situation, a late night graveyard shift. You should have showed exactly how creepy it is to be in a place that late at night at dark with all these weird things happening, with these weird animatronic figures shifting around, and you have the security cams. Somehow you made that not scary. Not only did you make it not scary, they made it boring. And this is coming from somebody who worked an overnight shift like this. I used to work at a radio station from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. And let me tell you, from the hours from about 12 a.m. to 3 a.m., you get pretty freaked out because you're just getting used to it. You're there very late. You're fighting your body's natural reaction to want to go to sleep at that time. You're doing things to keep you awake. I'm drinking coffee. And every single noise you hear, you question because you're just there alone. The radio station I worked in was this really big, old, creepy building. Sometimes it would sound like there was somebody pushing a mop bucket down the hallway. I would go look out and there would be nothing there. Probably not haunted, probably just a lot of things running in my brain, but that's how creepy it is, and that's how much your mind messes with you when you are working at a place overnight and supposed to be the one looking over everything. They didn't show that in this movie. It should have been creepy enough just to be there on your own without the animatronics there, and they completely fumbled that. Not only that, the acting throughout this entire movie was terrible. Did Josh Hutcherson even show up? Like, was he there? He was on the screen, but was he there? I don't think he was. And for somebody who needs a movie to put him back in the spotlight, put him back on the map, this was terribly miscast. And I feel like maybe they got him because he has some name recognition. Maybe they were trying to find somebody else to fill this role, and they landed on him and thought, okay, maybe we can make this work. It did not work. His performance was so flat. He had no great interactions with anybody on the screen, and it was really important to his relationship with his sister to have some kind of big brother role. And I know the relationship in the movie is a little bit complicated. It's supposed to be that she's not speaking to anyone and she's having trouble connecting with people. And you have this whole plot line of her like drawing pictures and not really saying a whole lot. So I get it on that front. But still, it felt like he wasn't acting with them, he was acting at them. And not only that, the way they wrote his character, there was a whole lot of telling you and not showing you. There's literally one scene in this movie where he tells the female cop, who is essentially kind of the love interest, kind of the one helping him navigate his new security shift. He sits down and tells her his entire life story. How lame is that? That is so lame. You're supposed to tell me through his actions, through what he is trying to accomplish in this movie and build his character, not just sit down and say, these are all the reasons I am the way. Like, no, that is so lame and so boring and such a cop out. I hated that. And also the fact that this movie even tries to play itself off as a scary movie. This movie was in no way scary whatsoever, and that's ultimately why it lost me. The trailer was creepy in its own way. It didn't look like it was going to be terrifying, but there was no part of this movie that had any horror element whatsoever. Very minimal blood, no use of jump scares, which I find cheap to begin with. But if you have a boring movie like this on your hands, at least hit me with a cheap jump scare. There wasn't even that. And there wasn't even any playfulness, because that's really what this movie was missing. It's a scary movie that takes place in an abandoned pizzeria where there are fun child games all around. It's essentially a old school Chuck E. Cheese, but with kind of a weird vibe to it. And you make that boring? There's so many fun, creative things that were going off in my mind of things they could have done. So it led me to believe that they didn't have enough money to make the movie they wanted, that they were relying on the IP being Five Nights at Freddy's, and being that it's based on a video game, and thinking that so many people are going to be interested in this movie because of that, that they didn't really have to try hard. So maybe they spent so much money making the actual animatronic characters, making those lifelike, which those were at least interesting to look at, but they didn't really do a whole lot that gave me anything to root for or even root against. So this movie ruined my Halloween weekend, and I want it back, even though I have the Regal Unlimited, so I'm only out 55 cents, only out the tax. I'm good with that. And the movie is rated PG-13, but rate this movie PG. I guess because of the blood and because of the killing, but I don't see it anything worse than you would be exposed to on your newsfeed on Instagram. So it really wasn't that bad on a horror level. Maybe there was some language in there that I missed just because I'm so used to hearing bad language in movies, but it felt really like a cautionary tale to kids. I feel like parents should show this movie to their kids if they want them to stop begging them to take them to Chuck E. Cheese. Here, watch this movie. You'll never want to go see and visit Chuck E. Cheese ever again. That is what this movie should be. So maybe that's the reason it classifies itself as a scary movie. So there were so many things that I did not like about this movie. It just really lacked imagination. The only thing that redeemed it was, I feel like, Matthew Lillard is a gem that we don't appreciate. He was really committed to his role. He really shined in a movie where there weren't really that many things to be excited about. There were some cool shots, so a couple, maybe a half point for the cinematography in this movie. But really, the entire tone was off on this movie. The acting was terrible. the horror elements were subpar at best. I'm just thinking about how much this movie annoyed me, and I'm getting angry again as you hear. So, if I had to rate this movie, first of all, don't go see it in theaters. Don't waste your time. And I don't even think it's worth a stream because the only thing that really kept me watching it was the fact that I was in a theater. If I would have been at home watching this movie, I probably would have stopped it in those first 30 minutes because it was just so bad and boring to even get going. And there were only little breadcrumbs that kind of strayed me along. It was kind of like a trail of M&Ms leading me to something that I'm like, okay, maybe this is going somewhere. And about halfway through, I'm like, I just have to know how this ends. I just want to know what the conclusion is here so I can get on with my life. And even as I was leaving, the guy who was about to clean there at the Regal said, hey, you want to stick around for the post-credit scene? I was like, no, I'm good. I didn't like the pre-credit scene the entire movie. I'm not going to stick around for the post-credit scene. So for that reason, Five Nights at Freddy's, am I giving it 5? No, I am giving it 1.5 out of 5 animatronics.